Google Trends says aqueducts are not a hot search item, are never a hot search item, and making a video about them is probably not in the best interest of this channel. Counterpoint, aqueducts are completely awesome, and for the cities that have preserved them, they're really integral to the city identity. So hang on to your hats, folks. The top 10 urban historic aqueducts are next. This is City Nerd, where we scoff at trending topics and throw our bodies on the gears and levers, the vast machinery of the YouTube algorithm. Subscribe for weekly content on transportation and cities. And if you really want to stick it to the man, try hitting the like button on a video about obsolete water conveyance systems. So let me preface this by saying I'm a transportation planner, not a hydraulic engineer, but I think the concept with aqueducts was simple. You wanted to be able to get water from a distant high point to a low point where there was a lot of demand for water. So probably a city. And that meant you needed a very gradual downhill slope. You really had to build tunnels and structures along the way. So not that different a concept from building a rail line through mountains and over valleys. So for this channel, I'm kind of less interested in aqueducts that are out in the middle of nowhere, and really just concerned with the ones that have survived in an urban setting, in spite of development pressures, and have become inextricable from a city's identity. So, I mean, Pont de Gard in southern France is really cool, but I can't include it. I mean, this is City Nerd, not Hinterlands nerd. Van Vitelli outside of Naples is kind of in this category too, and also the Ferreras Aqueduct in Catalonia. So today I'm counting down what I think are the 10 coolest historic urban aqueducts. I sort of did this quantitatively, but it's definitely got a lot of subjectivity in it. So what was really important was how grandiose is it, and how much trouble has a city gone through to preserve it? So in other words, how old is it, how big is it, and how much modern urban infrastructure has to weave in and out of it. A couple definitions before we get started. When I say urban, I mean it's in a city. And as a US-based planner, my threshold for that is 50,000 people. That's what gets you an urbanized area designation in the census, and it's what triggers the formation of a metropolitan planning organization. The less said about that, the better, but I'll just leave some links down in the description. So 50,000 is the threshold, so I'm not requiring that these aqueducts be in like central Shanghai or something. And then when I say aqueduct, I just mean a structure, probably arched, probably made of stone, and not, say, a tunnel or a channel. The Colorado River Aqueduct, for example, is impressive in its own way, but it's not what I'm talking about for this list. Also, aqueducts that are just ruins in city parks, like the aqueducts in Parco degli Acquedotti in southern Rome, or the Acqueducto de los Milagros in Merida, Spain. Those are cool, but I want to focus on aqueducts that are really integrated into the city infrastructure. So those ones don't make the list. Okay, enough explanation, but one last thing. I'm gonna count through the 10 a bit differently than usual. Instead of immediately telling you where we are, I'm gonna show you some street views, and you can pause the video and see if you can figure it out, kind of like GeoGuessr style. And if you're an aqueduct nerd, you might already have a couple in mind that you suspect are gonna be on the list. So see how many of these you can get before I reveal the names and the locations. Let me know how you did down in the comments. Okay, let's get into it. Number 10. This one runs down the center of a boulevard, which isn't uncommon for this list. Lots of activity, lots of driving through the arches, which, I don't know, is kind of mandatory to even be considered for this ranking. So Roman Empire era aqueducts are cool and everything, and we'll get to some on this list, but you know where else they have cool aqueducts? Mexico. This is the aqueduct in Morelia, and it is lovely. Number 9, this is in a major capital city, and it's kind of grandiose as this freeway passes through it. Again, not Roman Empire era, but probably Roman influenced. This is Aguas Livres Aqueducto in Lisbon, Portugal. Number 8, this one's also more of a modern aqueduct, and it's not a very long section. But what's cool is they converted it into a bridge for this tram line, so I gotta give extra points for that. Also, this is in the center of a very large city, over 10 million in the metro area, which makes it the second largest city in the country. This is Carioca Aqueduct in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Very nice. Number 7 is in what we think of as an old place, but the structure itself is young by aqueduct standards, 16th century. It's got some double-decker action, which I think is worth extra points. By the way, I'd have loved this list to be a tour of all the continents, but I really struggled to find compelling aqueducts in Australia or Africa or even Asia. So if you know of something I missed, leave it down in the comments. So this is the aqueduct in Kavala, Greece, on the north shore of the Aegean. Really pretty. Number 6. This one actually has a few things going against it. It isn't in a very big city, just a hair over 50,000. And it's not even in the center of the city, but it does date from the 1st century. And it's got a couple sort of crazy things going on. I mean, how do cars even get through this thing? I'm thinking they did not get this design out of the Ashto Green Book. This is Aqueducto San Lazaro in Merida, Spain. And yeah, maybe this is a bit of a makeup call for not being able to include Los Milagros, which is really beautiful, but it's in the middle of a park. Number 5, you may recognize this one from my intro screen. This one isn't super old, it's late 1700s, but the stonework is really cool and it really imposes itself on the city. This is the aqueduct in Santiago de Querétaro, Mexico. Hey, guess who's filming on location this week? Things I do to bring you guys quality content. So, a couple observations from my field visit. The aqueduct is almost entirely within the median of the Calzada de los Arcos, which runs just east of the city center. The street has lots of restaurant spaces that are designed specifically around views of the arches. You've heard of transit-oriented development? This is kind of like defunct aqueduct-oriented development. By the way, do you think eating at a beer hall where everything on the menu is basically $1 is advisable? I rolled the dice on it and I wasn't disappointed. Anyway, the whole street has a lot of businesses named for the aqueduct, or the arches, or they use the arches in their branding. So it's clearly a really important local identifier. And at the west end, the aqueduct kind of morphs into this wall that runs around this old convent. And the wall itself is home to some of the local population. Finally, the way you know a city takes its aqueduct very seriously is when the crest for their first division football team actually has an aqueduct on it. Number 4 is actually multiple aqueducts, and it was even hard for me to figure out which ones these were. You've got kind of a transit center going on with rail running through one of the arches, and then this thing runs to the southeast of the city about 5 miles through lots of neighborhoods with a bunch of roads threading through it. So you just knew Rome had to be on this list. I mean, building a modern city around ruins is kind of the brand. The first location I showed is the Porto Maggiore in central Rome, which is the intersection of Acqua Claudia and Anio Novus. And it's really the northwest terminus of a much longer aqueduct that goes all the way down to Park of the Aqueducts. So that's very cool stuff. Number 3, this one gets big points for age. It dates from 226 AD. So it's old, it's got multiple roadways threading through narrow arches in ways that would make highway engineers super queasy. And it's even got a center running bike path that's got its own arch. So guess what? We're still in Rome. This is Aqua Alexandrina out east of the city center. Number 2 is also Roman Empire era, built in the late 4th century. Look at this double-decker beauty. I just want to spend a little time here checking out the chill neighborhood cafe scene happening in the western section of the aqueduct. Look how they use the arches for shade. I mean, it just looks so relaxing. And then you've got this market street running through, and the whole thing just looks super walkable. And to be honest, I just kind of want to go here right now and have like a cappuccino or something. But then you go like 300 feet to the east, and this is what it looks like. It's kind of like roadway design whack-a-mole. So this aqueduct kind of wins on sheer mass. The urban integration is phenomenal, and it's in a really large city. In fact, depending on kind of how you measure it and the definition you use, it's the largest city in Europe, which apparently still doesn't get it to the top of my humble ranking, but this is the Aqueduct of Valens in central Istanbul, Turkey. Okay, I do have honorable mentions, but first, you know, maybe Google Trends is actually right, and I'm the only person out here who thinks aqueducts are cool. I'd like to think that's not the case, and this video is actually gonna blow up, but just on the off chance that doesn't happen, feel free to send topic suggestions my way. If I use your idea, I'll give you a shout out. I actually believe I have my first viewer suggested topic lined up for next week. Finally, as always, subscribe if you're enjoying the content, and a big thanks if you're already subscribed. Okay, a few honorable mentions. This kind of tends to be a US-focused channel, and the US is notably absent from this list. Even though Mexico shows up twice, and it would probably show up like 2 more times if I made this a top 20. Anyway, the honorable mention would be the Croton Aqueduct, which served in New York City. It's essentially gone now, but we do still have the high bridge over the Harlem River, which once supported the aqueduct and now just functions as a ped bridge, but it's actually pretty cool. A couple honorables from Portugal. The Amarera Aqueduct in Elvas. Elvis. Didn't qualify because the town itself is around 25,000 people. It's pretty cool. I mean, it dates from the 16th century. It's got roads running through it, and it's visually striking, but it isn't really integrated into an urban environment. Also, Aqueducto de São Sebastião in Coimbra, Portugal. And I am probably just destroying these pronunciations. Anyway, this one does qualify, but it's not particularly old. It isn't tall. It's kind of a short segment. It's not especially visually striking in the context of this list, but it's still cool. And what I love is when you try to Google Earth it, you run into this sort of forbidden zone at the East End, which I believe is a penitentiary of some sort. So anyway, prisoners need water too. Finally, this last one doesn't make the list just because it's sort of ancient fragments. But the Caños de Carmona in Sevilla, Spain is just really freaking cool. By the way, if you're one of those people who evangelizes about Dutch cycling infrastructure and Copenhagen, but you never talk about Sevilla, maybe reconsider. Okay, number one should be the most recognizable entry on this list, but it could be that I'm just an aqueduct weirdo. This one's in a small city, just a bit over 50,000, but it is the centerpiece of the city. It's like the big statement coffee table in the middle of the city's living room. It's close to 2,000 years old, incredible design, beautifully preserved and restored. I mean, it's so spectacular that it's probably a tourist nightmare for the locals, but I don't know, what are you gonna do? The local football team, Gimnastica Segoviana, yeah, they definitely have an aqueduct on their team crest. And then they do Querétaro one better by actually having the aqueduct on the city coat of arms. This is the Aqueduct of Segovia, just about an hour outside of Madrid. And that's all I got. Thanks for indulging me in the world of urban aqueducts this week. Drop a like on the video if you enjoyed, and we'll go on a new expedition next week. See you then.